My Apache neighbor told me, "She doesn't love you," I asked. "Then what is love?" He had lived in the small rented house for almost 3 years, long enough to believe that life had finally settled into a shape he could trust. Every morning followed the same pattern. He woke up early, made tea, checked his phone, and prepared for work. In the evenings, he returned home tired but calm, believing that someone cared for him, even if that care was quiet and not always shown in words. He thought love did not need to be loud. He thought love could exist in routine. The neighborhood was old and quiet. Most people kept to themselves. Children played in the afternoons, dogs slept in the shade, and the sound of distant traffic filled the pauses between conversations. Next door lived an elderly Apache man. He was not talkative. He sat outside most evenings, watching the street as if he had all the time in the world. He greeted people with a nod, not with long sentences. Everyone respected him, though few really knew him. The man had noticed the neighbor many times but had never spoken much to him. A short greeting, a polite smile, nothing more. He believed that some people preferred silence, and he respected that. He himself was not very expressive either. He believed feelings could be understood without being explained. His relationship had begun years earlier, full of hope. In the beginning, there were long talks, shared dreams, and laughter that came easily. Over time, things changed. Messages became shorter. Conversations stayed on the surface. Yet he told himself that this was normal. Life became busy. Love, he believed, became quiet with time. He never questioned it deeply because questioning felt dangerous. If he questioned, he might discover something he was not ready to face. That evening was ordinary. The sun was low, painting the sky with soft colors. He stepped outside to throw away some trash. The Apache neighbor was sitting on his chair, as usual, looking at the road. As the man walked past, the neighbor spoke for the first time in a long while. "She doesn't love you." The words landed heavily, though they were spoken calmly. There was no anger, no judgment, no drama, just a statement. The man stopped walking. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. He turned slowly and looked at the old neighbor, whose eyes were still fixed on the street. "What did you say?" the man asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The neighbor finally looked at him. His face showed no emotion, only certainty. "She doesn't love you," he repeated. A rush of feelings flooded the man's chest: confusion, irritation, disbelief. He felt exposed, as if someone had read thoughts he had tried hard to ignore. "You don't even know her," the man replied. "You don't know us." The neighbor nodded once. "I know enough." The man felt anger rise, but it quickly turned into discomfort. He wanted to defend his relationship, his choices, his belief that he was not wasting his life. Instead, he forced a short laugh. "You're wrong," he said. "Love isn't always obvious." The neighbor did not argue. He only said, "That's true, but it is always present." The man walked back into his house, his heart beating faster than usual. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a moment. He told himself the neighbor was just an old man with opinions. He told himself not to let a stranger's words disturb his peace. Still, the sentence echoed in his mind again and again. "She doesn't love you." He tried to distract himself. He turned on the television, checked his phone, and sent her a message. A simple one. He waited. Minutes passed. No reply. He told himself she might be busy. She often was. That was normal, he thought. Still, he checked his phone again. As the evening grew darker, his thoughts grew louder. He remembered moments he had brushed aside before. Times when he was the only one making plans. Times when his worries were met with silence. Times when his presence felt optional rather than important. None of these moments had felt serious on their own, but together they formed a pattern he had refused to see. He sat on the couch, staring at the blank screen, wondering why the neighbor's words hurt so much if they were untrue. If his relationship was solid, a stranger's comment should not have shaken him. That thought made him uneasy. Late that night, she finally replied. The message was short and practical. No warmth, no question about his day. He typed a response, then deleted it, then typed again. He did not know what he wanted to say. He did not want to sound needy. He did not want to start a conversation that might reveal distance he could no longer ignore. He went to bed restless. Sleep came slowly. His mind replayed old conversations, old promises, and moments where he had felt alone even when he was not physically alone. He wondered when he had started accepting less than he needed. He wondered if love could fade so quietly that only an outsider could see it. The next morning, he woke up with a strange heaviness. The routine felt different now. The tea tasted the same, the room looked the same, but something inside him had shifted. He carried the neighbor's words with him as he prepared for work. Throughout the day, he found himself observing others. Couples talking, laughing, arguing even. He noticed how people looked at each other when they cared. He noticed small gestures, attention, patience, effort. He asked himself when he last felt truly seen. In the evening, he returned home earlier than usual. The neighbor was outside again. The man hesitated, then walked over. "Why did you say that?" he asked. The neighbor did not answer immediately. He looked at the man for a long moment as if measuring his readiness to hear the truth. "Because I watch," the neighbor said. "I watch people every day. I see who waits and who chooses." The man felt a quiet ache in his chest. "You could be wrong." "I could be," the neighbor agreed. "But if I am wrong, my words would not trouble you." That sentence stayed with him. The neighbor did not offer advice or comfort. He did not tell him what to do. He simply returned his gaze to the street. The man went inside again, feeling both grateful and unsettled. That night, he did not turn on the television. He sat in silence and allowed himself to feel what he had been avoiding. He admitted for the first time that he had been lonely for a long time. He admitted that love should not feel like waiting all the time. He did not blame her. He did not paint himself as a victim. He simply recognized that something was missing. He had been giving more than he received, understanding more than he was understood. He had called it love because he did not know what else to call it. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one question formed clearly in his mind. It was not about her. It was about himself. If this was not love, then what was? The question did not have an answer yet, but it marked the beginning of something important. Not an ending, not a decision, but an awakening. And though it scared him, it also gave him a strange sense of calm. Because for the first time, he was no longer pretending that everything was fine. Outside, the neighborhood remained quiet. The old neighbor sat on his chair, watching the world with patient eyes, knowing that sometimes a single sentence was enough to start a long journey inward. The days after that conversation did not bring clarity. Instead, they brought awareness. The man went on with his routine, but now every small moment felt sharper, as if his mind had been quietly awake for years and had finally opened its eyes. He did not want to accuse anyone. He only wanted to understand what was real. He noticed how often he waited. He waited for replies, for plans, for signs that he mattered. He had told himself before that patience was part of love. Now he wondered if patience had slowly turned into silence. Each time his phone stayed quiet, it felt heavier than before, not because of anger but because of truth. At work, he found it hard to focus. His thoughts kept drifting back to past moments he had once ignored. He remembered birthdays where he planned everything, while she simply showed up. He remembered difficult days when he needed support but chose not to ask because he already knew the answer would be delayed or uncertain. None of these moments were dramatic. That was the problem. They were small enough to excuse, easy enough to forgive, and quiet enough to forget. In the evenings, he watched couples in the neighborhood. Some argued, some laughed, some walked in silence. But even in silence, there was connection. He realized that silence with care felt different from silence without it. One felt safe. The other felt empty. He had been living with the second one for a long time. He stopped sending extra messages just to keep the conversation alive. He told himself he wanted to see what would happen if he matched her effort instead of compensating for it. The result was uncomfortable. Days passed with fewer words. No concern was expressed. No question was asked. The space between them grew without resistance. At first, he tried to defend her in his own mind. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she expressed love differently. Maybe he was asking for too much. He had spent years making excuses, not because he was weak, but because he wanted things to work. Letting go of those excuses felt like betraying his own hope. One evening, she came over. The visit was casual, almost routine. She talked about her day, her plans, her worries. He listened carefully, as he always did. When she finished, there was a pause. She did not ask about him. The silence stretched. He waited, then realized he was waiting again. He spoke calmly. "Do you ever feel like we are just going through the motions?" She looked surprised, then slightly uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said slowly, choosing his words, "do you feel close to me?" She shrugged. "We're fine, aren't we?" That answer stayed with him. Fine, not happy, not connected, just fine. He nodded and changed the subject. He was not ready for a deeper discussion yet. He wanted to understand himself first. After she left, he sat alone and thought about how often he had settled for fine. He realized he had lowered his expectations over time, telling himself that maturity meant needing less. But now he wondered if maturity meant knowing when something was not enough. The Apache neighbor continued to sit outside every evening. They exchanged small greetings, nothing more. The man felt no anger toward him now. If anything, he felt gratitude. The neighbor had not created the problem. He had only pointed at it. One night the man could not sleep. He went outside and sat on the steps. The air was cool and quiet. The neighbor noticed him and spoke without turning his head. "Once you see, you cannot unsee," the neighbor said. The man nodded. "I don't know what to do with what I see." "You don't have to do anything yet," the neighbor replied. "Just be honest with yourself." That advice felt heavy but fair. The man understood that rushing to a decision would only create confusion. He needed truth, not drama. He needed understanding, not escape. Over the next few days, he began writing his thoughts down, not messages to her, but notes to himself. He wrote about moments when he felt valued and moments when he felt invisible. The list was uneven. The realization was painful, but it was also grounding. For the first time, his feelings had structure. He thought about love as he had known it growing up. Love had been effort. Love had been presence. Love had been shown, not assumed. Somewhere along the way, he had accepted something less and convinced himself it was enough. He noticed a change in himself, too. He was calmer, quieter, but also more distant. He was no longer trying to fix things alone. He was watching, listening, and learning. The silence between them grew clearer, not colder. It told him more than arguments ever could. One afternoon, she canceled plans at the last moment. The reason was simple and practical. No apology followed. He replied politely and put his phone down. He felt disappointment but not surprise. That lack of surprise troubled him more than the cancellation itself. That night, he stood by the window and looked at the street. The neighbor was there, as always. The man realized that the neighbor never interfered again after that first sentence. He did not push, advise, or judge. He trusted the man to reach his own understanding. The man asked himself a hard question. If nothing changed, could he live like this for years? The answer came quietly but clearly. No. He was not angry with her. He did not think she was cruel or careless on purpose. He simply understood that love could not exist where effort was one-sided. That truth hurt, but it also felt clean. It did not leave room for confusion. He realized that staying would slowly erase him. Leaving would hurt, but staying would empty him. For the first time, the idea of being alone felt less frightening than being unseen. He still did not know what love truly was, but he was beginning to understand what it was not. It was not constant waiting. It was not silence filled with doubt. It was not something that made a person feel small. As he prepared for bed that night, he felt tired in a different way, not drained but aware. He knew the next step would require courage. But awareness, he learned, always comes before change. Outside, the neighbor sat quietly, watching the world move forward, knowing that some lessons cannot be taught, only noticed. He reached a point where thinking quietly was no longer enough. Awareness had settled deep inside him, but questions kept rising, demanding answers. One evening, as the sky darkened and the street lights came on, he stepped outside and sat on the low wall near his door. The Apache neighbor was there, sitting in his usual chair. The man felt a strong need to speak, not to argue or complain, but to understand. He broke the silence. "You said she doesn't love me," he began slowly. "If that's true, then what is love?" The neighbor did not answer immediately. He took his time, as if weighing the meaning of the question itself. Finally, he spoke in a calm voice. "Love is when someone chooses you even when it is not easy. It is when care does not disappear in silence. It is presence." The man listened carefully. Those words were simple, yet they felt heavy. Presence, choice, care. None of them sounded dramatic, yet they described something he had been missing for a long time. The neighbor continued, "Love is not habit. Habit can look like love, but it asks for very little. Love asks for effort again and again." The man felt something tighten in his chest. He realized how much of his relationship had been built on habit. They were used to each other. They knew each other's routines. But knowing someone's routine was not the same as knowing their heart. That night, the man could not sleep. The neighbor's words stayed with him. He thought about moments when he felt truly chosen in his life, not only in relationships but in friendships and family. In those moments, he never had to wonder where he stood. Care had been clear even without words. He thought about how often he had questioned himself lately. Am I asking too much? Am I being unfair? Am I too sensitive? He now understood that love should not make a person doubt their worth. It should not require constant guessing. The next day, he decided to have an honest conversation with her. Not an argument, not a complaint, but a real talk. When they met, he felt nervous, but he stayed calm. He told her how he felt without blaming her. He spoke about feeling distant, about missing connection, about wanting to feel chosen. She listened, but her body language told him more than her words. She looked away often. Her answers were careful but empty. She said she cared, but she could not explain how. She said things were fine as they were. That word again. Fine, he asked. Do you feel close to me? She paused for a long moment, then said, I don't think about it much. That sentence hurt more than anything else she could have said. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. Love, he realized, is something people think about. It is something they protect. They ended the conversation politely, but something had shifted. The man felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what he had hoped for. Relief because the truth was no longer hidden. In the days that followed, he felt emotional waves come and go. Sometimes he missed her deeply. Other times he felt lighter than he had in years. He understood that he was not losing love. He was letting go of an idea. He began to spend more time alone, not to escape, but to reconnect with himself. He walked in the evenings, listened to music, and sat quietly without distractions. He noticed how peaceful his mind felt when he was not waiting for someone's attention. The neighbor watched him quietly, as always. One evening the man thanked him. You didn't save me, the man said. You just helped me see. The neighbor nodded. Seeing is enough, he replied. Time passed, and the man knew a decision could not be delayed forever. Staying would mean returning to silence and waiting. Leaving would mean facing loneliness and change. He chose the harder path, knowing it was also the honest one. When he told her that he needed to step away, she did not protest much. She seemed surprised but not broken. That confirmed what he already knew. Their connection had been uneven for a long time. After the separation, the man felt pain, but it was clean pain, not confusing pain. He allowed himself to grieve. He did not rush healing. Some days were heavy, some were calm. He accepted both. He started rebuilding his life slowly. He focused on work, health, and small joys he had ignored before. He noticed how good it felt to give energy to things that gave something back. He learned to sit with silence without feeling empty. He learned that being alone was not the same as being unloved. He learned that self-respect was not selfish. One evening, as he watched the sun set, he thought about the question that started everything. What is love? He smiled softly, realizing he still did not have a perfect answer, but he now knew what love should feel like. It should feel steady. It should feel mutual. It should feel like home, not like waiting outside the door. The neighbor sat quietly next door, watching the street, knowing that another person had learned an important lesson, not through advice or force, but through honesty and time. The man went inside, closed the door gently, and felt something he had not felt in a long while: peace. After the honest conversation with her, the man felt like he was standing on uncertain ground. Nothing dramatic had happened. There was no loud argument, no sudden ending. Yet inside him, something important had shifted. The truth was now visible, and once seen, it could not be hidden again. The days that followed felt strange. They still talked sometimes, but the tone had changed. He noticed how careful her words were, how distant her energy felt. She was polite, calm, and reasonable, but not warm. He realized that warmth was what he had been missing all along. He tried not to rush into any decision. He reminded himself that relationships deserved thought, not impulsive choices. Still, his heart felt heavy. Each interaction now showed him the gap between what he needed and what was being offered. One evening they met again. They sat across from each other, sharing tea in silence. The quiet was not comfortable. It was filled with unspoken thoughts. He looked at her and wondered how two people could sit so close and still feel so far apart. He spoke gently. "Do you feel happy with me?" She paused, thinking carefully. "I feel stable," she said. Stable. That word stayed with him. Stability was important, yes. But love was more than stability. Love was warmth, effort, and emotional presence. He understood then that she was not wrong for wanting stability. They simply wanted different things. He nodded and did not argue. He felt no anger toward her. He saw now that forcing love where it did not naturally grow would only bring pain to both of them. That night, he walked home slowly. The streetlights flickered on one by one. The Apache neighbor was sitting outside, as always. The man stopped nearby, unsure whether to speak. The neighbor looked at him and spoke first. "You are carrying a heavy decision," he said. "I am afraid of making the wrong one," the man replied honestly. The neighbor nodded. "Fear often comes before freedom." Those words settled quietly in the man's mind. He went inside and sat alone in his room. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future without her. The image scared him at first. It felt empty. But when he looked closer, he noticed something else too: peace. He thought about how much he had changed over the years, how he had slowly shaped himself to fit the relationship, how he had stayed quiet when he wanted to speak, how he had waited when he wanted to feel chosen. He realized that love should not require someone to disappear piece by piece. The next morning, he woke up early and sat by the window. The world outside was calm. Birds moved freely, without hesitation. That simple scene reminded him that life continued, no matter how hard a decision felt. Throughout the day, he felt pulled in two directions. One part of him wanted to stay because staying felt familiar. The other part wanted to leave because leaving felt honest. He understood that comfort and truth were not always the same thing. In the evening, she came over again. They talked about simple things at first: work, weather, small plans. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. "I don't think this is working anymore," he said quietly. She looked surprised but did not interrupt. "I care about you," he continued, "but I don't feel connected, and I don't think that can be fixed by waiting longer." She listened carefully. Her face showed concern but not shock. After a long pause, she said, "I thought we were okay." That word again, okay, fine, stable, he nodded. "That's the problem, I don't want okay, I want something real." She sighed softly. "I don't know if I can give you more than this." Her honesty, though painful, felt respectful. In that moment he knew the answer he had been avoiding. Love could not grow where both people were not equally invested. They talked for a while longer, calmly and kindly. There were no accusations, no blame, just acceptance. When she finally left, the house felt quiet in a new way, not empty but open. That night was difficult. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Waves of doubt passed through him. Had he given up too soon? Was he expecting too much? But beneath those questions, a steady voice inside him whispered that he had chosen truth over fear. The next few days were emotional. Some mornings he woke up feeling light. Other mornings the weight returned. He let himself feel both. He did not try to distract himself with noise or busyness. He learned to sit with discomfort, knowing it would not last forever. He stopped checking his phone constantly. He stopped replaying conversations in his mind. Slowly, the space she had occupied began to feel like his own again. One evening, he went outside and sat near the neighbor. They did not speak for a while. Then the man said, "Letting go hurts." "Yes," the neighbor replied, "but holding on to what is not real hurts longer." That simple truth stayed with him. As time passed, he noticed small changes in himself. He laughed more easily. He slept better. He felt more present in his own life. The pain had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. He realized that ending something did not mean it had failed. It meant it had taught him something important. He had learned about his needs, his limits, and his worth. One afternoon, he cleaned his house and removed items that carried heavy memories. Not in anger, but with gratitude. He kept the lessons and released the rest. By the end of that period, he felt stronger. Not because he was happy all the time, but because he was honest with himself. He no longer needed someone else to define his value. As he sat quietly one evening, watching the street grow dark, he understood that this was not the end of his story. It was the turning point, the moment where he chose himself without bitterness. The neighbor remained outside, calm and watchful, knowing that the hardest part of growth was not pain, but acceptance. Inside, the man closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He had faced the truth, and though it had cost him comfort, it had given him clarity. And clarity, he now knew, was a kind of freedom. Life after the separation moved slowly at first. The man did not rush to fill the empty space. He allowed the quiet to exist. Some mornings felt light and hopeful, while others felt heavy and long. He accepted both kinds of days, understanding that healing was not a straight road. It bent and turned, sometimes bringing him back to feelings he thought he had already passed. He changed small things in his daily routine. He woke up earlier and went for short walks before work. The streets were calm at that hour and the air felt clean. Walking helped him think without pressure. He no longer checked his phone expecting a message that would not come. Instead, he focused on his steps, his breathing, and the sounds around him. At work, people noticed a change in him. He spoke less, but when he did, his words felt more certain. He no longer carried the weight of pretending. He realized how much energy he had spent trying to keep something alive that was already fading. Now that energy belonged to him again. There were moments when memories returned without warning. A familiar song, a place they once visited, a quiet evening that reminded him of shared time. When those moments came, he did not push them away. He allowed himself to feel the sadness, then let it pass. He understood that remembering did not mean regretting. One evening, he sat outside as the sun slowly disappeared behind the houses. The Apache neighbor was there, sitting in the same chair, watching the street. The man realized how little they had spoken, yet how important those few words had been. "I think I understand now," the man said quietly. The neighbor looked at him. "Understanding comes when you stop running from truth." The man nodded. He knew that was true. He had spent years avoiding difficult feelings because he feared what they would lead to. Now he saw that facing them had not destroyed him. It had freed him. As weeks passed, the man began to feel more connected to himself. He cooked meals with care instead of rushing. He read books he had once ignored. He reconnected with old friends, not to complain, but to laugh and share time. He realized how healing simple human connection could be when it was mutual. He also learned to set boundaries. When someone canceled plans without care, he did not chase. When conversations felt one-sided, he did not force them forward. This was new for him. It felt strange at first, but also empowering. He understood that protecting his peace was not unkind. One day he received a message from her. It was polite and neutral, asking how he was. He read it slowly. He did not feel anger or longing. He felt calm. He replied kindly but briefly. After sending the message, he placed the phone down and went back to what he was doing. That moment showed him how far he had come. He no longer measured his worth by someone else's attention. He measured it by how he felt when he was alone. And when he was honest, he felt steady. He started thinking again about love, not as something he had lost, but as something he had learned from. He understood now that love was not about holding on at all costs. It was about balance. It was about two people choosing each other freely, not out of fear or habit. Love, he realized, should feel like safety, not confusion. It should bring growth, not constant doubt. It should allow both people to be fully themselves without shrinking. One evening, he sat at his desk and wrote in his notebook again. This time, the words were different. He wrote about gratitude. Gratitude for lessons learned. Gratitude for pain that had taught him clarity. Gratitude for the neighbor who spoke when silence had hidden the truth. He did not romanticize his journey. He knew there would still be lonely days ahead. But loneliness no longer frightened him. It was no longer a sign of failure. It was simply a space waiting to be filled with something meaningful. As months passed, he felt open again. Not desperate, not guarded, just open. He did not rush into anything new. He allowed connections to grow naturally. He paid attention to how people treated him, how they listened, how they showed up. He trusted himself to notice red flags without ignoring them. One afternoon, while returning home, he saw the neighbor standing by his door. The man felt a sudden wave of respect and warmth. "I never thanked you properly," he said. The neighbor smiled slightly. "You did the work yourself." That was true. The neighbor had only spoken a few sentences. The rest had been the man's own courage. That night, as the man lay in bed, he reflected on the question that had once haunted him. What is love? Now the answer felt clearer, even if it was still simple. Love was honesty. Love was effort. Love was peace. Love was choosing and being chosen, without needing to beg or guess. He smiled softly in the darkness. He knew he was ready for whatever came next, not because he had all the answers, but because he trusted himself to ask the right questions. Outside, the neighborhood slept quietly. The streetlights glowed gently. The Apache neighbor sat peacefully, watching the night, knowing that sometimes the greatest change begins with a single truth spoken at the right moment. Inside his home, the man closed his eyes and rested. For the first time in a long while, his heart felt light. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. And that, he now understood, was where real love begins.